If you've ever spent any time in the desert, you learn quickly that the desert does not wait around to warn you. It's very patient. It just waits. And on May 11th of 1889, it waited with quiet patience as a U.S. Army convoy rolled out from Fort Grant carrying more than $28,000 in gold and silver coin across the Arizona Territory. The morning air felt ordinary enough to everybody who was there. It was the kind that gave no hint of what was coming. Major Joseph Wham rode with steady confidence, his wagons heavy not just with the money, but with the weight of responsibility. Every turn of the wheel, every hoofbeat, carried the weight of trust, and perhaps just a touch of overconfidence that nothing like this had ever happened before in that region. The men who were escorting him were not exactly inexperienced. There were 11 Buffalo soldiers who formed the backbone of this convoy. They were disciplined and capable and used to operating in harsh and unpredictable conditions. Among them was Corporal Isaiah Mays. He was a man whose life had begun in slavery in Virginia, a man who had carved his own place through service and grit and quiet determination. By 1889, he was stationed in Arizona, far from where his life had started, carrying a rifle and a responsibility that did not leave room for any kind of hesitation. He was not a man given to theatrics or loud declarations. He was steady and observant and exactly the kind of soldier you wanted watching your back when and if things went wrong. The journey itself unfolded like countless others would before it. Dust rose gently from the road as the wagons creaked along, and the convoy followed a familiar path toward Fort Thomas. It was very much like something that you would see from one of the old John Wayne movies. Alongside the soldiers traveled a civilian driver and a woman named Frankie Campbell, who had her own reasons for making that journey. It was a strange mix of military duty and everyday life, a reminder that even serious missions sometimes carry very ordinary moments with them. Yet the land that they moved through was not forgiving, and the pass ahead narrowed into a place that visibly dropped, and danger could hide in plain sight. So when they reached the boulder, the mood shifted in a way that is difficult to explain, but also rather impossible to ignore. It sat squarely in the road. It was too large to simply ride around, which forced the convoy to stop. Soldiers moved forward to clear it, doing exactly what they had been trained to do. But as they approached it, small details began to stand out. The rock didn't look like it had fallen there naturally. It looked like it had been placed there. Somebody noticed a footprint, and then in a heartbeat, the illusion of safety collapsed. Gunfire erupted from above, and as men rose from hidden positions along the ridge, the sound cracked through the air, sharp and sudden, and within seconds, the convoy was thrown into chaos. Mules dropped where they stood. Men were hit, and the carefully ordered movement of the convoy dissolved into a frantic search for cover. Corporal Mays, positioned at the rear, did not hesitate. He returned fire with his revolver from behind the escort wagon, holding his ground even as the position quickly became untenable. As the fight intensified, Isaiah Mays moved forward, joining Major Wham behind a rocky ledge that offered only the slimmest protection. Bullets were hitting the stone and the dirt around them, and the attackers adjusted their aim as they realized the soldiers were not going to break. Sergeant Benjamin Brown, who was already wounded, continued to fight with a determination that bordered on restlessness and relentlessness. But the situation was shifting, and Mays saw that clearly. The attackers were maneuvering along the ridge. They were working to create a crossfire that would trap these men completely down in this little valley. About 30 minutes into the battle, with men wounded and the positions failing, Mays made a decision that would define the entire moment. He informed Major Wham that the position could not be held and that he was ordering a withdrawal. It was not an easy call, and it was not immediately welcomed, of course, but it was the right call. Under his direction, the remaining soldiers pulled back to a dry creek bed, dragging themselves and each other through the dust and the pain. They were creating distance between themselves and the relentless firefight from above. And this is where the story takes a most unsettling turn. The men firing down were not distant outlaws just driving through the territory. These were locals. They were ranchers, neighbors, men who knew the land intimately and had taken the time to build fortifications, to stage the boulder, and even to craft fake rifle barrels from yucca stalks to make their numbers appear larger. This was not just random chaos. This was planning and intention, and it meant the convoy had been walking into a trap long before they ever saw that rock in the road. Pinned down now in the creek bed, with 8 of the 11 soldiers wounded, the reality here became completely impossible to ignore. The strong box could not be retaken. They had to leave it behind. The fight, as bravely as it had been carried out, was no longer winnable. From their position, they watched these bandits descend from the ridge, approach the wagons, and break open the lockbox with an axe. The sound of it carried across the distance. It was a final punctuation mark on a battle that had already taken its toll. The attackers moved with efficiency. They were gathering the coins and loading them and disappearing into groups into the desert that had concealed them so well. And remember, this was $28,000 worth of coins and paper money. There's a lot of weight. And when the gunfire finally stopped, the silence that followed was heavier than the noise that came before it. The soldiers emerged slowly, injured but alive. Their mission lost, but their courage was undeniable, especially that of Isaiah Mays. It had taken more than an hour and a half, but the outcome had been decided the moment that boulder was placed in the road. The investigation that followed seemed, at first, like it might bring some solid answers. There were arrests made, and there were names that were made known. Evidence was presented in court, and yet, when the trial concluded, every single accused man was acquitted. The stolen money was never recovered. It just vanished, leaving behind a story that felt unfinished, as if the truth itself had been seen, but never quite held on to, like slipping sands. For Corporal Isaiah Mays, though, the story did not end with this battle. He received the Medal of Honor for his actions, the recognition for the clarity and the courage that he showed under fire. But life after service was not kind. He worked as a laborer. He struggled. He applied for a pension that was denied. And eventually he died in a state hospital. He was buried under a simple numbered marker that said nothing of what he had done. It would take more than a century for his resting place to reflect the honor that this man had received and earned when he was finally reinterred at Arlington with the dignity he deserved. And that is what lingers. Here's a man who made the right decision in the absolute worst moments, who helped to save lives when everything around him was collapsing, and whose recognition came far too late to change the course of his own life. The gold disappeared. The robbers walked free. But the courage shown in that narrow pass remains. It's a quiet reminder that sometimes the most important actions are not the ones that win, but the ones that prevent anyone else from being lost. So here's something to sit with. When history remembers the moment, but forgets the man who made the difference, what does that say about who we choose and what we choose to value? And of course, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you follow the History Happens Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. And subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. I have no doubt we'll be seeing more Medal of Honor recipients in the future. Thank you for watching.